Today we are going to discuss about the new chapter, ecosystem. Do you heard about the term? In lower class you already learned about the ecosystem. What is ecosystem? A group of organisms interacting among themselves within their environment. That is called a ecosystem. What is environment? Do you heard about environment? Environment means the biological as well as the physical world where we live. That is called our environment. So, ecosystem means a group of organisms interacting among themselves within their environment. That is called ecosystem. The term ecosystem was first introduced by Arthur Tansley in 1935. Professor Eugene P. Odom, considered as the father of ecosystem ecology. If you observe our ecosystem, we can see that many organisms. Is it the entire biosphere we can call global ecosystem. If you observe that particular global ecosystem, we can see that different varieties of plants and animals. There are two types of ecosystem. One is terrestrial ecosystem or the natural ecosystem, and another one is the man-made ecosystem. One is natural ecosystem and man-made ecosystem. Varieties of ecosystems are found in our environment. So, if you consider all this ecosystem, we can categorize that particular all ecosystem into two. One is called a natural ecosystem and another one is called a artificial ecosystem. Listen here. Ecosystem is a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact each other and also with the physical environment. So, here the structure and the function of ecosystem. In this case, different type of ecosystems are shown here. One is terrestrial ecosystem, that is one kind of the natural ecosystem. Example, forest, grassland, desert, etc. These all are coming under the category of terrestrial ecosystem, which is coming under the category of natural ecosystem. Then another one is aquatic ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystem also coming under the category of natural ecosystem. What are the aquatic ecosystems? Pond ecosystem, lake ecosystem, wetland ecosystem, river and estuaries. These all are the different type of ecosystem. Then another one kind of the ecosystem, that is called a artificial ecosystem. What do you mean by artificial ecosystem? Such a type of ecosystem is also known as man-made ecosystem. That ecosystem is constructed by the help of the human beings. That is called a man-made ecosystem. That particular man-made ecosystem is coming under the category of artificial ecosystem. Example, crop field and aquarium. These all are we can call different type of ecosystem. All together we are calling global ecosystem. So the global ecosystem consists of two common type of ecosystem. One is artificial ecosystem and another one is natural ecosystem. Is it clear? In every ecosystem consists of abiotic and biotic components are present. What do you mean by abiotic component and biotic component? Abiotic component means non-living organisms and biotic component means living organism. Both organisms are coming together to form an ecosystem. Is it clear? So, these organisms are interact among themselves within their environment in such a way that the ecosystem is developed. Is it clear? If you consider one of the ecosystem, we can see that two important structural features. One is called stratification, another one is species composition. There are two structural features. One is stratification, another one is species composition. What do you mean by species composition? If you take any one of the ecosystem, we can see that different varieties of species, that is plants and animals in ecosystem. So altogether we can call that is the species composition. Is it clear? One example, lake ecosystem. If you consider the lake ecosystem, we can see that different varieties of plants and animal species there. So that is one of the structural feature of an ecosystem. Then another one structural feature of an ecosystem, that is called stratification. What do you mean by stratification? If you consider the forest, that particular forest can be vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels. That is called a stratification. Example, forest. If you consider the forest, the toppermost layer or the top strata occupy the trees, and below that strata occupy shrubs, then herbs, then different grasses, etc. So in this way, their plants are arranged in different layer or different strata. That vertical distribution of different species occupying different level is called a stratification. This stratification and the species compositions are the two structural features of every ecosystem. Is it clear? So ecosystems means what? A group of organisms interacting among themselves within their environment, that is called ecosystem. The entire biosphere we can consider as a global ecosystem. In every ecosystem consists of two important parts. One is the biotic component part, another one is the abiotic component parts. One of the structural feature of that particular ecosystem is vertical distribution of different layers occupying different organisms. That is called the stratification, and another one is the different varieties of species and plants occupying particular area. That is called the species composition. All together we can call ecosystem. Just one example for ecosystem, pond ecosystem. If you consider the pond ecosystem, it is one kind of the natural ecosystem or natural aquatic ecosystem. If you observe the pond ecosystem, there we can see that a biotic component as well as the biotic component. What are the abiotic component and biotic component found in that particular ecosystem or pond ecosystem? Abiotic components like air, water, soil, temperature, these all are the abiotic component found there. Look, abiotic component, water, soil deposit, and the climatic conditions, solar input, cycle of temperature, day and night, etc. These all are the different abiotic components found in where pond ecosystem. You know that what is pond? Pond is a shallow, simple, self-sustaining water body that exhibit all basic components of an ecosystem, that is called a pond. There we can see that abiotic components like water and soil, climatic conditions such as solar input, cycle of temperature, daylight, etc. The same time we can see that there is another one of the component that is called a biotic component. Biotic components are different type. One is autotrophic components. So we know that these are the producers. So such a type of plant synthesize their own food material by using solar energy, that is called photosynthesis. So autotrophic plants are there, autotrophic components are present there, phytoplankton, some algae, and the floating submerged and marginal plants are found there. The same day we can see that some of the consumers who are consumers, these are the heterotrophic organisms that consume the synthesized food, or autotrophs or the producer, that is called consumer. Zooplankton, free swimming and bottom dwelling forms. Then finally we can see that there is decomposers, the microorganisms like fungi, bacteria and flagellate bacteria. These all are the decomposers we can see in where pond ecosystem. So these all organisms, the abiotic organism and the biotic organisms are interact among themselves within their environment. That environment is the pond environment. That is called pond ecosystem or aquatic ecosystem. Is it clear? So what are the biotic component? What are the abiotic component? Living component is called biotic component, and a non-living component is called abiotic component. These two components are interact among themselves within their environment. That is called a ecosystem. Is it clear? Next one, functions of biosphere. We know that what is biosphere? The life existing sphere is called a biosphere. What are the functions of biosphere? The functions of biospheres are: first step is conversion of inorganic material into organic material with the help of using what? Solar energy or radiant energy, that is photosynthesis. After that, consumption of autotrophs by heterotrophs, which means that particular food is consumed by heterotrophs. That is the second step. And the next step is the decomposition and mineralization. Next step is there is a unidirectional movement of energy in higher trophic level. These are the functions of biosphere. So here we are discussing about the functions of ecosystem. There are four important functions, or we can say that there are four components of ecosystem. One is productivity, another one is decomposition, another one is energy flow, another one is nutrient cycle. Before I already mentioned the functions of biosphere, the same things here we are going to explain. The first one productivity, then second one the decomposition, then energy flow and nutrient cycling. What is productivity? What is productivity? One of the functions of ecosystem, that is productivity. As you all know that the solar energy or the radiant energy is required for the sustaining and functioning of an ecosystem. Green plants synthesize their own food material with the presence of sunlight, that is said to be photosynthesis. We already learned in small classes. Based on that particular concept, here we are discussing productivity. What is productivity? The rate of biomass production or organic matter production, that is called productivity. What is productivity? The rate of biomass production or organic matter production, that is called productivity. It is expressed in gram per square meter per year. That is the expressions of what? Productivity. Gram per square meter per year. That is the expression. Gram per square meter per year. That is the expression of what? Productivity. The productivity can be divided into two types. One is called primary productivity. Another one is called secondary productivity. Primary productivity means the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis is called a primary production. So primary production takes place in which side? During photosynthesis time, plants, how much amount of organic matter is produced, that is called a primary productivity. It is expressed in energy or weight. Primary productivity is expressed in energy or weight. So what is primary productivity? The amount of biomass production by plants during photosynthesis, that is called a primary productivity. The primary productivity is divided into two: gross primary productivity and net primary productivity, or we can say that GPP and NPP. So the productivities are divided into two, that is primary and secondary productivity. The primary productivity is again divided into two. One is gross primary productivity and another one is net primary productivity. What is gross primary productivity? Gross primary productivity means the rate of biomass production in plants during photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, how much amount of biomass production takes place in plants? That is called gross primary productivity. The considerable amount of gross primary productivity is used by plants for respiration. So, gross primary productivity means the amount of production, the amount of biomass production takes place in plants during photosynthesis, that is called gross primary productivity. That particular considerable amount of gross primary productivity is used in plants for what purpose? Respiration purpose. During photosynthesis, they are synthesizing amount of organic matter, that is the gross primary productivity. That gross primary productivity is used by plants for what purpose? Respiration. The considerable amount of GPP is used by plants for respiration. Then another one is net primary productivity. What is net primary productivity? We already mentioned gross primary productivity, that particular amount is used by plants for respiration. So balance amount is how much? That is called a net primary productivity. Net primary productivity means gross primary productivity minus loss of respiration, or we can say that NPP equal GPP minus R. During gross primary productivity, the considerable amount of gross primary productivity is used by plants for respiration. So, the net primary productivity is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs. Here, for respiration, plants using that particular considerable amount of GPP. After that, how many amount of GPP is present? That particular amount is said to be NPP. That is for consumption to heterotrophs. It is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs, that is herbivores and decomposers. So we can say that NPP is the gross primary productivity minus respiration losses. So NPP equal GPP minus R. These are the two type of primary productivity. What are the two type of primary productivity? One is gross primary productivity and another one is net primary productivity. It is very important questions. What is GPP and what is NPP? Gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Is it clear? Next one, secondary productivity. We already explained what is primary productivity. Primary productivity is place in plants during photosynthesis. The next one is secondary productivity. It is the rate of biomass production of new organic matter by consumer. So, with the help of sunlight, the green plants synthesize their own food material. At that time, how much amount of organic matter is produced? That is called primary productivity. Then secondary productivity means what? It is the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumer. We can say that the consumption of autotrophs by heterotrophs. At that time, how much amount of organic matter is produced? That is called a secondary productivity. Primary productivity varies in different ecosystem because it depends on the plant species inhabiting an area where that particular plant species is present. That is one of the factors. Then environmental factors depending, then availability of the nutrients, then photosynthetic capacity of the plants. These all are very important for the primary productivity. It depends upon this particular factor, that particular primary productivity is varies. So these are the factors affecting primary productivity. What are the factors affecting primary productivity? The plant species inhabiting an area, then environmental factor, then availability of the nutrients and the photosynthetic capacity of plants. These are the important factors responsible for the primary productivity. Is it clear? Look here, annual net primary productivity of whole biosphere is about 170 billion tons dry weight of organic matter. Of this, despite occupying 70% of the surface, the productivity of the ocean is only 55 billion tons. This is the productivity. Here primary productivity and secondary productivity is there. So we already explained about the primary and secondary productivity. Is it clear? Next one, decomposition. What is decomposition? Breakdown of complex organic matter by decomposers into inorganic substance like carbon dioxide, water and nutrients. Or we can say that breakdown process is called a decomposition process. Here what they are going to break? Here the complex organic matter is break to produce what? Inorganic substances with the help of the decomposers to produce what they are producing? Carbon dioxide, water and nutrients. That is called decomposition. For this process, oxygen is required. The large amount of oxygen is required for which process? Decomposition process. Raw material for decomposition is called a detritus. Raw material for decomposition, that is called detritus. With the help of the detritus, the organic matter is decomposed to produce inorganic matter like carbon dioxide, water and other nutrients. So what is detritus? The raw material for decomposition, that is called a detritus. Some of the detritus are dead plants remains, that is leaves, bark, flower, etc. Dead remains of animals, fecal matter. These all we can call detritus. So dead remains of an organism, that is called a detritus. Detritus are of two types, above ground detritus and below ground detritus. Above ground detritus are leaves, bark, flowers, dead remains of animals, fecal matter. These all are the above ground detritus. Below ground detritus means dead roots and other parts, that is called below ground detritus. The steps involved in the process of decomposition are fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification and mineralization. This is very important question. What are the steps involved in the process of decomposition. First step is fragmentation, followed by leaching, followed by catabolism, then humification and mineralization. These are the 5 steps involved in the process of decomposition. What do you mean by fragmentation? We already know that here the breakdown of organic substances. That organic substances, we can say that the detritus, the breakdown of raw material or the detritus into smaller particle or smaller fragments, smaller particles or smaller fragments by the help of detritivorous. Detritus consumed organism. Detritus consuming organism is called detritivorous. By the help of the detritivorous, that particular detritus or the dead remains of an organism is break down into smaller particle. One of the examples for detritivorous, earthworm. Is it clear? With the help of the earthworm, the dead remain of the organism or the dead remain of the leaves, or we can say that detritus is going to break and to produce smaller particle or smaller fragments. That is called fragmentation. Next step is leaching. After fragmentation, the water soluble inorganic substances like sugar, amino acids goes down into the soil horizon and precipitate as unavailable salt. That is called leaching. So after fragmentation, we got many substances. From that substances, water soluble substances like sugar and amino acids are goes to where? Sugar and amino acids are go down into the soil horizon and precipitate as an unavailable salt. That is called leaching. The third step is catabolism. Catabolism is one kind of the metabolism. What is metabolism? It is the sum total of chemical reaction takes place in our body or organism. That is called metabolism. It is one kind of the metabolism. So here that particular detritus is degraded into simpler inorganic substances by bacterial and fungal enzyme. That is called catabolism. With the help of the fungal enzyme or bacterial enzyme, that particular detritus is again break down to produce similar inorganic substances. That process is called catabolism. So here fragmentation, leaching and catabolism occur simultaneously. Next step is humification. What is humification? The formation of humus from detritus. The formation of humus from detritus. That is called humification. What is humus? Look here. Humus means dark amorphous substances in soil. Accumulation of humus. This is the humus. Look, dark amorphous substances in soil. That is called humus. The formation of or the accumulation of humus from detritus. That is called humification. Humus is resistant to microbial action and so decomposes very slowly. Humus is resistant to microbial action. That is the reason why the decomposition is very slow. Being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. That particular humus contains number of nutrients are there. We already know that. What are the nutrients required for the growth of plants? Last year we already learned about the mineral nutrition lesson. So there we already learned different nutrients like macronutrients and micronutrients. These are the nutrients required for the growth and development of the plant. So the humus contains high amount of the nutrients, so we can say that humus is served as a reservoir of the nutrients. After that, that particular humus is again break down to produce inorganic substances by the help of some microbes. That is called mineralization. It is the release of inorganic substance due to degradation of humus by some microbes. That is called mineralization. What are the inorganic substances? Carbon dioxide, water and available nutrients like ammonia, calcium, potassium, etc. These all are formed from where? Humus. That process is called mineralization. So these are the important steps involved in the process of decomposition. What are the steps involved in the process of decomposition? First one is fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification and mineralization. Is it clear? This is one of the diagrammatic representation of decomposition cycle in terrestrial ecosystem. In this diagram, fragmentation process is there, then leaching process is there, then catabolism process is there, mineralization process is there, humification process is there. So these are the steps involved in the process of decomposition. So the factors influencing decomposition. What are the factors influencing decomposition? One is chemical composition of detritus. What is detritus? Dead remains of organisms like plants or animals, that is called detritus. Their chemical composition is one of the factor influencing decomposition. Another one is the climatic factor like temperature and soil moisture. If the decomposition is slow in detritus rich in lignin and chitin, lignin and chitins are rich in detritus, the decomposition rate is slow. In detritus contain high amount of lignin and high amount of chitin, the decomposition rate is slow. If the detritus contain rich amount of nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugar, nitrogen and sugar substances are more in detritus, that particular decomposition rate is fast or it's quicker. Then another one of the factor, climatic factor, that is temperature and soil moisture. Warm and moist environment is favor for decomposition. We already know that warm and moist environment that is required for the decomposition. Then another one, low temperature and anaerobiosis inhibit the decomposition. These are the factors responsible for decomposition. Is it clear? Next function, energy flow. We know that sun is the ultimate source of energy. With the help of that particular energy, the green plant synthesize their own food material. So sun is the only source of energy for all ecosystem except deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem. Then of the incident solar radiation, what is incident ray from the sun? One of the ray is coming, one of the light is coming, that is called the incident ray. On the incident solar radiation, less than 50% is photosynthetically active radiation, or we can call PAR. What is photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR? Only the visible part of the solar radiation is effective in photosynthesis, that is less than 50%. That particular radiation is called a photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR. Plants and photosynthetic and chemosynthetic bacteria fix solar radiant energy to make food. We know that with the presence of the sunlight, green plants, photosynthetic bacteria and chemosynthetic bacteria synthesize their own food material. Plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR. For effective photosynthesis, less than 50% PAR required, or photosynthetically active radiation required. From that particular percentage, plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR. This energy sustains the entire living world. Sun is providing the incident ray. Is it? From the total incident radiation, only less than 50% is PAR, that is effective for photosynthesis. From that 50%, from that less than 50%, plants capture 2 to 10%. Is it clear? For what purpose? Synthesizing food material. The energy flow in an ecosystem obey the two basic laws of the thermodynamics. One is the first law of the thermodynamics and another one is the second law of the thermodynamics. What is the first law of the thermodynamics? The energy can neither be created nor be destroyed, but it is transferred from one state to other. That is the first law of thermodynamics. What is the second law of thermodynamics? Whenever the energy is transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, there is a loss of energy in each trophic level. That is called a second law of thermodynamics. Whenever the energy is transferred from one form to one state to another, there is a decrease in the amount of useful energy. That is the second law of thermodynamics. Based on these two laws, the flow of energy in an ecosystem takes place. Is it clear? As you already know that in an ecosystem, the green plants are the producer. If you consider any one of the ecosystem, you can see that there is the biotic and abiotic component. Here the biotic components are green plants. So the green plants synthesize their own food material with the help of the sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, chlorophyll. The green plants prepare their own food material. That process is said to be photosynthesis. So we can say that the green plants are synthesizing their own food material. So they are the producer. They are organisms that synthesize food. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producer herbaceous and woody plants. Primary producers in an aquatic ecosystem are phytoplankton, algae and higher plant. If you consider the terrestrial ecosystem, their producers are herbaceous and woody plant. If you consider the aquatic ecosystem, their producers are phytoplankton, algae and higher plant. So the energy trapped by the producer, that particular energy is transferred from producer to consumer and so on. That is the way the energy flow takes place. Is it clear? Then who are consumer? Who are consumer? These are the organisms or animals directly or indirectly depending for the food or depending to the producer, that is called consumer. Consumers are three types. One is the primary consumer, then secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. What is primary consumer? All the herbivorous. What is herbivorous? Plant eating animals are called herbivorous. That all the herbivorous are coming under the category of primary consumer. Feed on plants, example insects, bird, mammals, mollusks, etc. These all are the primary consumer. And the second one is the secondary consumer. Or we can call primary carnivorous. That particular organism feeds on herbivorous. The organism those who feed the herbivorous, that is called secondary consumer. Example frog, fox, man, etc. And the tertiary consumer, that is the secondary carnivore eating blood, tiger, lion, etc. That particular organism consume the primary carnivore. These are the different type of consumer. So the consumers consume the herbivorous organism. Consumers are directly or indirectly depending to the producer or autotrophs. There are three type of consumer. Primary consumer, that is the herbivorous plants, and next one is the secondary consumer, that is the primary carnivore, and the tertiary consumer, that is the secondary carnivore. These are the different type of consumers present in ecosystem. These all are the biotic components. So here we already mentioned one of the organism is eating to another one of the organism while eating one by one. So we will get one kind of a chain, that is called a food chain. So here one of the organism is consumed by another organism. In this way a chain is established, that is called a food chain. Or we can give another one definition related to the food chain. What is food chain? It is the interrelationship between the organism and ecosystem. It represents a definite pattern of eating and being eaten. If you consider one of the example, here one of the example is given. Look, grass is the producer. The grass is eaten up by grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten up by frog. Frog is eaten up by snake, and the snake is eaten up by hawk. Here the hawk is the final consumer or the top carnivore, and the producer is what? Which one? Producer is which one? Grass is the producer. So in this chain, one of the organism is consumed by another one of the organism. This is the interrelationship between the organism in an ecosystem. This particular interrelationship is represent a food chain. There are two type of food chain. One is called a grazing food chain and another one is called a detritus food chain. There are two type of food chain. One is called a grazing food chain. Another one is called a detritus food chain. What do you mean by grazing food chain? Here the primary consumer feed on living plants. Grazing food chain, the primary consumer feed on herbivorous or green plants, that is called a grazing food chain. The grazing food chain begins from where? Producer level. Look here, the grazing food chain, leaves eaten up by caterpillar, which is eaten up by thrush. So in this food chain, we can see that the primary consumers feed on living plant, or primary consumer is caterpillar. That caterpillar feed on which one? Plants or living plant. So in this type of food chain is called a grazing food chain. Is it clear? Then another one is detritus food chain. This is one of the example. Dead leaf, that is eaten up by woodlouse, then that is eaten up by blackbird. In this case, that particular food chain is begin with a detritus. Is it? Begin with a detritus. What is detritus? Dead remain of an organism, that is called a detritus, that is eaten up by woodlouse and finally eaten up by blackbird. This is the another one type of the food chain. Here that particular food chain is begin from where detritus organism. So here the primary consumer feeds on dead organic matter or detritus. So this type of food chain is called a detritus food chain. Death of organism is the beginning of DFC. So this is GFC. Grazing food chain is GFC. There living plant is the beginner. Detritus food chain begin from where dead organisms, and grazing food chain begin from living plants. Is it clear? These are the two type of food chain. One is grazing food chain and another one is detritus food chain. Is it clear? In grazing food chain, flow of energy is less fraction only, but here detritus food chain flow of energy is in high. Is it clear? Before we already explained, detritus is made up of decomposers or saprotrophs such as fungi, bacteria. These are the detritus. They excrete digestive enzymes that break down detritus into simple inorganic material which are absorbed by them. Thus, they get energy and nutrients. This is the decomposition. Before we already explained related to the decomposition. Saprophyte means what? The organism consumed dead and remains, that is called a saprophytes. These are the saprophytic organism. Pseudomonas, a decomposer bacterium, then mushroom, a decomposer fungi, decomposing fruits due to fungus. These all are the example for saprotroph. If you consider the aquatic ecosystem, GFC is the major conduit for energy flow. Terrestrial ecosystem, if you consider a much amount of energy flow through the DFC than through GFC. So we already explained the food chain. So many food chains are interconnected to form a food web. Before we already explained only one food chain. Like that, many food chains are interconnected to form a food web. Look, this is one of the food web. Here, number of food chains are interconnected. From here, we will get lot of food chain. All the food chain together we can call what? Food web. So what is food web? The network of interconnected food chains are called a food web. Look here, one of the example. You can write many food chain from here. In your public exam, like this, one questions will come. They will give one of the diagram. After that, they will ask one question: what is food web? Write any 5 food chain from the food web. So it is very important. What is food chain and a food web? What is food chain? The transfer of energy and food from one organism to another organism, repeated eating and being eaten. That is called a food chain. In this way, a chain is established. That is called a food chain. What is food web? The network of interconnected food chain is called a food web. Is it clear?